Hello and welcome to Investment Insight. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button. Now let's break down what's happening in the markets today in a clear and simple way.
Yeah, and today's topic is definitely one that's got a lot of people talking.
Oh, absolutely. If you scrolled through the news this morning, you probably saw a headline that, frankly, feels designed to give you a panic attack. Something along the lines of, the U.S. only has 15 days of emergency oil left.
Right. It's an incredibly aggressive way to frame the data.
It really is. And, it taps right into the anxiety you're probably already feeling. I mean, you pull up to the gas station, you're paying well over $4 a gallon, and then you open your phone and see all these intense conflicts in the Middle East.
Exactly. And then you have financial commentators just casually throwing around phrases like a second oil shock.
Yes,
Yeah.
which makes it feel like we're just teetering on the edge of some massive economic shutdown.
Yeah, but when you actually look past the raw anxiety and dig into the recent data, it paints a much more, I guess, nuanced story.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive. We are going to step back from the apocalyptic headlines, look at the actual analysis, and figure out what is genuinely happening with U.S. gas prices and our national oil reserves.
Because the reality is actually pretty surprising.
It is. The most surprising thing I found when going through this research is that the core problem right now has absolutely nothing to do with a lack of oil being pulled out of the ground.
No, not at all. The bottleneck is entirely different.
Mm.
But to really understand the current market dynamics, we kind of have to start by dissecting that 15 days number.
Yes, scary headline number.
Exactly. Because it is based on real data, but the way it's being presented to the public is just, well, wildly misleading.
So let's get right into those numbers. Based on recent analysis, the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which I think we'll just call the SPR for the rest of this conversation, right?
Yeah, SPR is easier.
So the SPR fell to 293.4 million barrels by mid-August of 2026. And just to give that some historical context, that is the lowest the reserve has been in about 43 or 44 years.
Right.
Which, on its face, hearing we are at a 4-decade low, that sounds incredibly alarming.
Well, it is a historically low number for sure. The SPR, which by the way is essentially this series of massive underground salt caverns in Louisiana and Texas, has been significantly drawn down.
Just massive caves full of oil.
Basically, yeah. Now, the math that generates that scary 15 days headline is actually pretty straightforward. The United States consumes an enormous amount of petroleum products every day.
Like how much exactly?
Roughly 20 million barrels every single day. So if you take that total reserve we mentioned, the 293.4 million barrels, and you divide it by our daily usage of 20 million.
You get about 14.6, so roughly 15 days.
Right. So mathematically, the calculation holds up, but logically,
Yeah.
as a measure of our actual energy security, it completely falls apart.
Yeah, I was trying to make sense of this 15-day timeline, and honestly, it feels like looking at my emergency savings account, seeing I only have enough cash to cover maybe 2 weeks of groceries, and going into a full panic.
That's a really good way to look at it.
But that panic assumes I lose my job today, have absolutely zero income coming in tomorrow, and possess no other resources at all. Like, doesn't the U.S. still physically pull new oil out of the ground every single day?
We pull an astronomical amount out of the ground.
Mm.
That 15-day calculation assumes this sort of doomsday scenario where all domestic oil production instantly drops to absolute zero.
Which is impossible.
Right. And it also assumes all imports from our allies completely vanish overnight. But if we look at the actual data, the United States is currently pumping out 13.8 million barrels of crude oil every single day right here at home.
13.8 million barrels a day. I mean, going back to the analogy, that is a massive continuous paycheck coming in.
Exactly, and that figure doesn't even account for the oil we consistently import from really stable trading partners, places like Canada and Mexico.
Right.
The Strategic Petroleum Reserve was never designed to be the sole engine powering the entire American economy if the world just, suddenly stopped spinning.
It's a shock absorber.
Exactly, it's a policy tool. It's designed to smooth out temporary disruptions. Like if a major hurricane hits the Gulf Coast, or there's a sudden short-term geopolitical crisis.
So we aren't going to wake up in 2 weeks to some dystopian movie scenario where every gas pump in the country runs completely dry.
No, definitely not. What the data points to isn't an imminent collapse. It's more about having a very thin margin of error right now.
Because we've been using it a lot lately.
Yeah, we relied heavily on the SPR during the 2022 Russia-Ukraine war to stabilize global prices. And then we had to tap into those reserves again in 2026 due to the escalating conflict with Iran.
Right, so sticking with that savings account idea, it's like we've just had a string of massive unexpected expenses.
Okay,
We
right.
had to fix the roof, then the car transmission blew, and we just haven't had the breathing room or the extra cash to build that emergency fund back up to where it was.
Yeah, and the real consequence here is policy limitation. If another massive, unforeseen shock hits the global market tomorrow, the government simply doesn't have the luxury of flooding the market with hundreds of millions of reserve barrels to suppress prices, like we did in the past.
The safety net is just a lot smaller now.
Precisely.
Which honestly brings up the most frustrating question for anyone driving a car right now. If the U.S. has plenty of crude oil again, pumping 13.8 million barrels daily, why did it cost me over $60 to fill up my sedan yesterday?
It's a great question.
And why are diesel prices skyrocketing? Like, if we have all this oil, why is the fuel itself so punishingly expensive?
So to answer that, we really have to draw a hard line between two very different things, crude oil and refined products.
Okay, so crude oil being the thick, raw, unrefined black liquid we pull out of the earth.
Right.
And refined products being the gasoline, the diesel, the jet fuel that we actually put into our engines.
Exactly. You cannot pump raw crude oil into a standard vehicle. It has to be processed, it has to be separated and chemically treated at these massive, highly complex industrial facilities called refineries.
Right. I keep visualizing this whole thing like a giant bakery.
A bakery. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, so having massive reserves of raw crude oil is like having, say, 1,000 pounds of raw flour sitting in your pantry.
Right, okay.
It means you aren't going to starve, but you can't just eat raw flour. You need a kitchen, you need a massive industrial oven, and a baker to turn that raw ingredient into a loaf of bread you can actually consume.
That is a perfect analogy, actually.
So are our global kitchens broken? Is that what's happening?
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
The data shows that the global refining infrastructure is in a severe state of crisis right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, based on recent analysis, over 20% of the Middle East's refining capacity, which normally processes about 9.6 million barrels every day, that is currently shut down due to the ongoing conflicts.
Wait, 20% of a massive global energy hub is just completely offline?
Completely offline. And combine that with the fact that several major Russian refineries have been heavily damaged recently.
Right, right.
When you tally up all the global losses, refinery output has dropped by a staggering 5.1 million barrels every single day.
So the world has essentially lost a huge chunk of its ability to bake the bread.
Exactly. And this creates a fascinating but also really painful paradox right here in the U.S.
How so?
Well, if you look at the recent data for mid-August, U.S. commercial crude oil inventories actually increased.
Really?
Yeah, they went up by 4.4 million barrels.
So we literally have extra raw flour piling up in the pantry.
Yes, but when you look at the other side of the ledger, U.S. inventories for diesel and intermediate fuels are 13% below their seasonal average.
Oh man, so the price of the finished bread is still skyrocketing.
Because we have the raw crude, but we are running incredibly low on the refined, usable fuel.
I'm stuck on this though. If prices are this high and profit margins are soaring, why don't oil companies just push more crude through the American refineries? Or, just quickly build new ones to capture all that profit?
It comes down to physical and chemical limitations. American refineries are currently running at a blistering 97.2% capacity.
97.2%.
Yeah, they are functionally maxed out. You have to remember, you are dealing with highly volatile, highly pressurized chemical processing plants.
Right. It's not just a thermostat you can turn up.
Exactly. You cannot simply turn a dial to 110% without risking catastrophic industrial accidents. They are operating at the absolute limit of what physics and safety regulations will allow.
So they literally can't just bake faster.
No, they can't. And they can't just build new refineries overnight either. A new refinery takes a decade and billions of dollars to permit and construct.
Right. The regulatory hurdles alone must be insane.
Oh, absolutely. And with global governments pushing for a transition to electric vehicles by the 2030s, energy companies are terrified of investing $10 billion into a new refinery that might become a stranded asset in, say, 15 years.
No, that makes sense. Why build a massive oven if everyone's going to stop eating bread in a decade?
Exactly. So the infrastructure we have right now is all we are going to get.
Man, this completely warps the economics of fuel, doesn't it? Because the global kitchens are broken and our domestic kitchens are tapped out, so the people who own the working ovens have all the leverage.
They absolutely do. In the energy industry, they track something called the crack spread.
The crack spread.
Yeah, the term literally comes from the process of cracking long hydrocarbon chains in raw crude into smaller, usable molecules like gasoline.
Okay, got it.
So the crack spread is essentially the profit margin a refinery makes for turning a barrel of raw crude oil into a refined product like diesel. And because global refining is so severely bottlenecked right now, the profit margin for making diesel recently shot past $100 a barrel.
Unbelievable. So the baker is charging an absolute premium to bake the bread because almost no one else in town has a working oven.
Exactly. To put the impact of that bottleneck in perspective, European diesel prices are up over 70% compared to before these conflicts began.
70%.
Yeah, so the $4 gas you are seeing at the pump isn't caused by a crude oil shortage. It is entirely a refinery shortage.
Okay, the picture's really coming together now. So the rest of the world has lost a huge portion of its refining capacity. Their kitchens are shut down or damaged.
Yep.
So naturally, they're going to look over at the United States, where our kitchens are running at 97% capacity, and we are pumping record amounts of oil, and they are going to try to buy whatever American gasoline and diesel they can get their hands on.
That's exactly what's happening.
But how is this global desperation spilling over into the American economy?
It is fundamentally reshaping how energy is traded globally, shifting the market into what we call an insurance premium model.
Insurance premium model.
Right. To understand the gravity of this, we really have to look at the logistics of the Strait of Hormuz.
Okay, the Strait of Hormuz, that's the narrow waterway in the Middle East, situated right between Oman and Iran.
Yes. Historically, a massive percentage of the world's commercial oil flows through that one narrow geographic choke point. But due to the current conflict, that route is practically shut down.
Because it's just too risky.
It is simply too dangerous, yes. And insurance premiums for shipping companies have become way too high for commercial vessels to pass through reliably.
Which has to be terrifying for countries that don't produce their own energy.
Oh, it is. Think about the economies of countries like Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan.
Right, massive manufacturing hubs.
Exactly. Highly advanced manufacturing hubs. They produce the semiconductors, the specialized electronics, and the vehicles that the entire global supply chain relies on. These industries require massive, uninterrupted baseloads of energy. If their power grid falters because a fuel tanker gets sunk in the Middle East, their economies literally grind to a halt.
So they can't rely on hope. They need an absolute guarantee that the fuel is going to arrive.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And according to recent data, these Asian manufacturing powerhouses are shifting their strategy entirely. They are no longer shopping around for the cheapest barrel of oil on the open market.
They don't care about the discount anymore.
Nope. They are specifically buying U.S. oil for safety. They are purchasing the security of American logistics.
That makes total sense. I was reading through some of the data points, and it noted that South Korean companies are paying a massive $13 to $14 premium per barrel just to secure U.S. oil.
It's incredible.
That's an extra $13 on top of the base price of the barrel itself.
Yeah, and they're willing to pay it because a barrel of American oil loaded in Texas and shipped across the Pacific does not have to navigate a contested, active conflict zone.
It's like, okay, imagine you need to get home late at night in a city you don't know well. Okay. You can take a $10 bus ride, but the route goes through a really dangerous neighborhood where the bus might break down or you might get robbed.
Right, high risk.
Exactly. Or you can pay $30 for an Uber that takes a well-lit private toll road and drops you safely at your front door. You gladly pay triple for the Uber because you aren't just paying for the ride, you are paying for the guarantee of arriving safely.
That is exactly it. That mechanism is playing out on a multi-billion-dollar macroeconomic scale. The global oil market has shifted from prioritizing the lowest possible price to paying an insurance premium for the secure route.
Wait, if Japan, South Korea, and Europe are all rushing to buy American oil and American refined diesel because our logistics are safe, what does that mean for the American consumer driving to work?
Well, it creates an intense domestic squeeze. The United States has inadvertently become the world's energy safe haven.
Wow.
And because oil and refined fuels are globally traded commodities, that massive international demand pulls directly on U.S. domestic supplies.
So when I pull up to the pump, I'm not just competing with my neighbor for that gallon of gas. I'm actively competing in a bidding war against a Taiwanese semiconductor factory and a European manufacturing plant.
That's the reality.
Mm.
American drivers are feeling the financial pain precisely because America's energy infrastructure is so reliable.
That is so counterintuitive, but it makes so much sense.
Yeah. Global demand just bids up the price of the limited fuel our maxed out refineries can actually produce.
Which brings us to the political reality of all this, and this is where I really want to push back.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Gas prices are highly visible. Everyone sees the giant neon sign at the gas station every single day on their commute.
Absolutely.
And we currently have President Trump in office, who ran on an America First platform, and he's facing immense pressure from American consumers over these prices.
Right.
So if American drivers are competing against Japanese factories for our own domestic fuel, why on earth isn't the president just stepping in and saying, no more exports, keep all the American oil and gasoline here for Americans so the price drops?
It's a very common question.
Right. It sounds like an incredibly easy political win.
It does get raised constantly in Washington during energy crunches. But a total export ban is what policy analysts call a tail risk. It's a rare extreme maneuver that is technically legal under specific national emergency conditions. But implementing it would likely backfire catastrophically due to the specific chemistry of American refineries.
Wait, why? If we keep the oil here, supply goes up, price goes down. What is the catch?
The catch is that all crude oil is not created equal. U.S. refineries are highly specialized chemical plants.
Okay.
Decades ago, massive multi-billion-dollar facilities on the Gulf Coast were specifically calibrated to process heavy and sour crude oil,
Heavy and sour, meaning what exactly?
meaning it is highly dense and contains a lot of sulfur.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and we historically imported that specific type of crude from places like Venezuela, Mexico, and the Middle East.
Okay, but we just established we produce 13.8 million barrels of our own oil now.
We do, largely thanks to the shale revolution.
Oh.
But the oil we drill here in the U.S. is overwhelmingly light and sweet.
Meaning low density, low sulfur.
Exactly. So keeping all our domestic crude at home doesn't mean our domestic refineries can instantly process it efficiently.
Oh, wow. So going back to the bakery idea, it's like we suddenly started harvesting millions of pounds of almond flour, but all our massive industrial ovens and mixers are perfectly calibrated for heavy wheat flour.
That is brilliant, yes.
So we currently trade our almond flour to other countries in exchange for their wheat flour so our bakeries can run at maximum efficiency.
Exactly.
If the government bans trade, our bakeries don't just become less efficient. They literally start breaking down.
That is the exact structural dilemma. If the U.S., which is the world's largest energy exporter, suddenly stops selling light, sweet crude to the world, global prices would just skyrocket to unprecedented levels.
Right, because we pull all that supply off the global market.
Yeah. And because we still need to import heavy crude to optimize our own refineries, an export ban would trap oil we can't easily use while cutting us off from the oil we actually need.
What a mess.
It wouldn't necessarily lower the price you pay at the pump, but it would certainly devastate the economies of our closest allies who rely on our exports.
So if an export ban is totally off the table because it breaks the chemical calibration of our refineries, what levers is President Trump actually pulling to try and fix this?
Well, the current administration is mainly focusing on logistical optimization.
Like what?
For example, President Trump recently extended a 90-day waiver for the Jones Act.
Wait, the Jones Act. I've heard the name thrown around in political debates, but how does an obscure maritime law affect the price of my gas tank?
So the Jones Act is a century-old law that requires any goods transported by water between two U.S. ports to be carried on ships that are U.S. flagged, U.S. built, and mostly crewed by Americans.
Oh, so it's a protectionist law designed to maintain a domestic shipbuilding industry.
Exactly. But during an energy crisis,
It artificially restricts the number of ships available to move fuel around.
precisely, it restricts the ships available to move fuel from, say, refineries in Texas to consumers in New York or New England. By waiving the Jones Act for 90 days, the government allows foreign ships to transport energy between U.S. ports.
Which removes a layer of red tape and speeds up the delivery system.
Exactly.
Wait, I have to challenge this based on the math we just talked about earlier.
Sure.
You just told me our refineries are running at 97.2% capacity.
Yep.
And based on the data, the energy secretary is reportedly meeting with oil executives begging them to maximize output. But if they're already at 97.2% and the administration is doing a 90-day maritime waiver, aren't they basically just fighting over 2.8%?
That's a really good point.
I mean, that sounds like a rounding rounding error compared to the 5.1 million barrels missing overseas. Is this
Ah.
actually going to lower my gas price, or is it just political theater?
Well, your math is entirely correct. It is a marginal fix.
Just a drop in the bucket.
Basically, yeah. Waiving the Jones Act helps prevent localized shortages, like it ensures New York doesn't literally run out of diesel for a few days. But you are right, it does not solve the global macro problem of missing refinery capacity.
It's moving the deck chairs to make the ship run slightly more efficiently, but it doesn't change the size of the ship.
That's a great way to summarize it.
Man, this has been a truly fascinating deep dive. We have connected a lot of seemingly disparate dots today, and the through line is incredibly revealing.
It really is. When you look past the panic and the headlines, the actual structure of the crisis is very mechanical.
Right. We started with that terrifying 15 days of oil headline, which turns out to just be a mathematical trick that completely ignores the 13.8 million barrels of new crude oil the U.S. pumps every single day.
Right. We aren't running out of raw material.
Exactly. Then we explored the real bottleneck, which is a global shortage of refineries or kitchens. Overseas conflicts have knocked massive amounts of refining capacity offline, and our American kitchens are totally maxed out at over 97% capacity.
Which naturally leads to the geopolitical reality we are facing.
Right. Because global supply chains, especially through the Strait of Hormuz, are so dangerous right now, manufacturing giants like Japan and South Korea are paying a massive insurance premium to buy safe, reliable American energy.
Which creates that brutal paradox for the listener.
Yeah, America's success as a safe, stable energy supplier means American drivers are basically forced to compete in a bidding war against the rest of the world for our own fuel.
Exactly.
And because banning exports would wreck our own specialized refineries, the government is stuck making minor logistical tweaks, like waiving the Jones Act, while we all just pay over $4 a gallon.
That traces the exact mechanics of what is happening today perfectly.
Right.
But, before we wrap up, there is one final larger implication of this data that I think is crucial to consider.
Oh, where does this lead us in the long run?
Well, we've established that the world currently views U.S. energy as the ultimate safe asset, right?
Right.
And foreign manufacturers are willing to pay a hefty premium to guarantee their factories keep running. But energy is the base cost of civilization.
It powers everything.
Everything. So if Asian factories, the ones producing the world's semiconductors, the electronics, the vehicles, if they are permanently paying significantly more for their power just to keep the lights on, how will that permanently change the cost of everything you buy?
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about that. The base cost of manufacturing goes up across the board.
Exactly. If the cost to run a factory in Taiwan or South Korea increases because they are paying top dollar for safe American fuel, the cost to manufacture the electronics, the cars, and the consumer goods they export back to the United States will inevitably have to rise too.
That makes total sense.
The pain you are feeling right now at the gas pump. It might just be the very first domino in a much larger, longer-term wave of global manufacturing inflation.
That is a very sobering thought to end on. The premium price for the safe route eventually gets baked into the price of every single item on the shelves at Target or Amazon. It's not just a local supply issue, it's the cost of a broken global kitchen. Well, thank you all for joining us for this deep dive. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button.